All right, thank you. Well, my talk is the token non-flat Earth presentation to round out the day, although it does segue quite well out of Karen's. I am totally on board with everything that's been discussed today, but I'm very far from an expert on these points, so I prefer to stick with what I know well. But I do just want to relate a quick anecdote before I get into the main material. When I was preparing the writing of my book, Musical Truth Volume 1, which I put out in early 2016, the writing process had occurred through 2014 and 2015. During that time, the issue of the idea that we might not live on a spinning ball hurtling through the infinite vacuum of space after all had come across my radar. And like many people, initially I scoffed at it, I thought it was ridiculous, I just wanted to push it away, but it kept on coming back, and every time it kept bouncing back to me, I decided to look into it a little bit further, and eventually I got sold on the whole thing. But by the time I was fully convinced that we had been lied to about the cosmology of where we live, the manuscript of my book had gone off to be typeset. And I realised that in the wordage, it was absolutely littered with the phrase global. And so I recalled it, and I changed every reference to global to worldwide, and then put it out there. And I feel very happy that I did. There is actually a common thread running between everything we've heard about today and what I'm about to present, and that is duplicity and deception, and the fact that the public is always the last to know. So my presentation is titled The Weaponisation of Sound. I'm starting with a quote from the BBC, believe it or not. I don't often quote from the BBC, they're not exactly known for being a paragon of truth and virtue, but I couldn't disagree with this statement from Susie Klein on a show which went out a couple of years ago, where she says, she talks about music's uncanny ability to stir us up, to calm us down, to express every possible human emotion. It bypasses language and reason and aims instead directly for our souls. Music can console us and it can corrupt us, inspire resistance or collusion. So she's speaking to the idea that sound and the manipulation of it, because everything in this existence is made up of sound and light frequency, as we've heard on a few occasions today. If the manipulation of sound falls into the hands of those who have malevolent intent and don't have humanity's best interests at heart, then the results can be quite devastating. This was actually referenced in a record by Kate Bush that she put out in the 80s called Experiment 4. This is the music video for it. And in the song, she talks about a military-grade experiment, that's a surprise, isn't it? Which is all about using sound as a weapon. It's had many references in popular culture through the years, this subject, even in the Tintin adventures by Hergé, the Belgian cartoonist. So in this particular story, The Calculus Affair, Tintin and Captain Haddock discover that Professor Calculus is working on a machine designed to use sound as a weapon to destroy cities. And it falls into the hands of these world superpowers that want to use it to destroy their enemies. Well, in actual fact, Hergé based that story on very real technology. Over on the right here, we can see what he based it on, which came out of Germany during the World War II years. And there's also a reference to this type of technology in this article here from 2008. And it talks at the beginning there of higher volumes of infrasound affect the human central nervous system, causing disorientation, anxiety, panic, bowel spasms, nausea, vomiting, and eventually unconsciousness. That's what sound can do in the hands of the wrong people. You know, it's interesting because Greta Thunberg forgot to mention this in her address to the United Nations last week when she's talking about these imminent threats to human health and well-being. I guess it just slipped her mind, you know. And this is, by the way, the same technology which is used as the basis for the 5G rollout, which is planned for us all very soon. That is a military-grade technology based on the same sort of stuff we're talking about here. So what could possibly go wrong, right? We get into a real hot potato when it comes to discussion of the music industry and the ways in which it's used to manipulate the general public. And this is the issue of 432 versus 440 hertz. So musicologists and audiophiles and sound engineers will tell you that 432 is a very natural harmonic frequency for musical instruments to be pitched at. So the idea is that the A note is pitched to 432 hertz, and then all the other notes in the composition fall into line accordingly. The alternative application to that is 440 hertz, and this has actually been the international standard to which musical instruments and most recorded music that we get as consumers is pitched at. So these same scientists of sound will tell you that 440 is anything but a harmonic frequency and anything but a natural choice for us to be listening to music at. They will tell you that it's very discordant, it's very dissonant, it doesn't sit well with human physiology, human brain waves, and actually it creates states of anxiety and disturbance. And this has been observed many times in experiments. Now the figures here become very interesting. So 440 is the one that, according to these experts, we should be chucking out, and we should be remaining with 432. And it struck me some time back that 432 falls into place in a very fascinating cosmic sequence that we get. It's very unique in nature. It's not repeated with any other sequence of numbers. And this particular sequence starts with 27. And that puts me in mind straight away of the fabled 27 Club that we get in music legend. All these artists that have passed away at the age of 27 in strange circumstances. But either way, what you do here is you double the number each time. So from 27 you get to 54, then it's 108, 216, there's the 432, then you double that to get to 864. And we see so many applications of this sequence in many walks of life and in nature. So yogic schools teach that all living beings exhale and inhale 21,600 times a day. Doesn't matter where you put the zeros in this, by the way, it's the main core figures that are important. The Kali Yuga is said to last 432,000 years, being part of the Great Cycle, which itself lasts 4,320,000 years. There are 864,000 seconds in a day. 432,000 for day, 432,000 for night. So it seems this figure 432 is encoded into nature and creation itself. It becomes very interesting to take this further as well, particularly in light of what we're all here for and the information that we've heard today. Now, most of us probably reject these figures. 864,000 miles seems to be a rather optimistic diameter for the sun, if it really is only 3,000 odd miles away. But these are the official figures which have been put out there for these luminaries. So we're told that 864,000 miles is the diameter of the sun. Then, according to many claims, the moon has a diameter of 2,160 miles. So again, it's different representations of this same sequence and the same figures. One astrological age in a precessional cycle is said to be 2,160 years. And before I got into all this stuff, and when I was still a mainstream news and media believer, I was a follower of Graham Hancock. I thought he was a great author. I loved his book, Fingerprints of the Gods. In that book, I can recall that he said the Great Pyramid of Giza is a representation of the northern hemisphere of the Earth on a scale of 43,200. Then we hear that the polar diameter of Saturn is given as 108,000 kilometers, and its orbital period is said to be 10,800 days. So the point here is that I don't accept these figures, and I suspect that many or most of you don't either. They appear to be grossly fabricated, but it's very interesting that whoever did apply these figures and tell us things like the diameter of the sun is 864,000 miles, seem to have some awareness of this sequence which presents itself in nature. The 432s, the 864s, and all these different evocations of this sequence. And just to add an additional mind blower to this, I got it from Marty Leeds from listening to one of his radio shows many years ago. Marty is into gematria, applying numerical values to letters. And in this particular broadcast, he mentioned the word Jesus, which if you apply it to, I think it's Jewish gematria, it comes out as 45666. Interesting last three figures, right? But he totally blew my mind by revealing that if you multiply all of these figures together, you end up with 43,200. So it suggests to me that 432 Hertz is indeed something which is encoded into nature by the Creator, and it is the frequency with which we should be listening to our music. Unfortunately, most people are absorbing music at the dissonant frequency of 440, and that will not be by accident. This guy is Dr. Masuro Emoto, who passed away a few years ago, but he was a Japanese scientist who looked into the science of sound and the effect that sound frequencies and vibrational frequencies of words have on water. This was his speciality. He would expose containers of water to particular words. Now these could be words that are spoken, so you get the resonant frequency of the audio, or it can be a word in written form, the idea being that the word still carries the vibrational frequency signature. Whether you speak it or whether it's written, it's still attached to the word. He would then freeze the water very quickly and under a microscope study the patterns that were formed in response to these words. So here's some of the results. Whenever you get a word which is charged with positive, benevolent intent, you get these beautifully geometric and harmonic patterns. But when you expose it to phrases like "you fool," "you make me sick," "evil," and stuff like this, you get all these chaotic, hazardous kind of patterns, which are anything but harmonic. There's a few more examples there. And some more. "You make me sick, I will kill you." Doesn't produce the best results, it seems. When we look at the sonic signatures of audio recordings under an oscilloscope, we often come across what is known as a sawtooth wave, and this crops up quite often in popular music. That's how a sawtooth wave looks under an oscilloscope. And there was this guy, William, however you pronounce that, who appeared in this video interview that's available on YouTube. You can look it up there using the description at the bottom. This guy claims to have been a former druid working for the control system, but he went over to the light side and he revealed some of the secrets of what he was into. So he talked about the sawtooth wave, and he said it's a very disagreeable sound, like the sound of fingernails on a chalkboard. And he says, what I find extremely interesting is that some of the fuzz effect and these weird sounds that people like The Who and Jimi Hendrix and these early pioneers of rock music would do, a lot of that involves sawtooth waves. We get into the music of Jimi Hendrix again when we get into another aspect of sound production, and this is what's known as the tritone. The tritone is an interval between notes which is 3 whole tones apart. And this has long been considered to be very harmful for people to absorb. In the Middle Ages, the Catholic Church apparently banned the tritone from any of the music that was being produced at the time, because they just care about us and want to help us, you know. So there's an example of that. It was also known as the devil's interval, because it was supposed to be just so dissonant and so distressing for people to experience in a piece of music. Well, a very good example of the tritone, according to musicologists, would be Jimi Hendrix's Purple Haze. If you think about the opening chords to that, that is an example of a tritone in action. It's reputed to have been banned by the Catholic Church, as I said, and it's been greatly favoured by some of rock's more raucous performers from the 1960s onwards. So Black Sabbath's eponymous song is said to offer another prominent showcase of the tritone, along with much of the output of Slayer. That's a surprise, isn't it? The Million Song Dataset. This was an archive charting the progression or regression, you might say, of pop music between 1955 and 2010. So you had these expert analysts that were looking into the compositions of these pop songs, and they concluded that music has been getting dumber. And pop songs that have been served up to us have been more and more simplistic in their makeup, and that actually artificial intelligence algorithms are reporting what is going to make a catchy pop tune with a good hook that's going to draw people in. And the reason they've got dumber is because the attention spans of the average members of the public have been dwindling. With all these other things vying for our attention, the spans that people have to be able to concentrate on something are now down to a few seconds. So the reason pop music is now so bland is because the AI algorithms are recommending that you get more of these stupid sing-along hooks and all this to keep the listeners on board for as long as possible. Another thing that we have in the modern era when it comes to the way music is served up to us is that everything is now digitally, electronically produced. And a lot of people listen to most of their music in the form of MP3s. So the MP3 encoding process takes a much larger file, which has a full frequency audio range, and compresses it. And it does that to make a smaller file, which can be shared more easily, takes up less disk space. But the way this is achieved is that the process strips out aspects of the recording that it deems to be imperceptible to the human ear. So it might be a particular bass line, it might be a particular frequency. It gets rid of it, but it's done so subtly that the listener is unaware that this aspect of the recording is missing. So it strikes me that if you can strip away parts of a recording without anyone being consciously aware of it, then the opposite can be true. And you can be adding elements to a recording, you can be adding sound frequencies, and these are also totally imperceptible to the people on the receiving end of it. So it raises all kinds of questions about what's going into the music that we're now getting presented with, given that it's all digital and electronic in nature. And this brings in aspects of another presentation, which I did, just got a few slides from it here, Mind Control Through Electronic Dance Music. This is a subject of great interest to me. In the late 80s, I was right there at the forefront of the acid house rave scene when it emerged in the UK. Got caught up in that whole thing. I was very much into the music and the clubbing scene. Never actually did the drugs. I was always too level-headed for that. I lived a sheltered life. But when it comes to the music, I was very much into it. So I've come to some discoveries in recent years about what the electronic dance music scene could now be getting used for when we look at the picture long term. So the acid house rave scene, which grew up in the UK in the late 80s and then gave birth to the era of the superclubs in the 90s, to my mind was very much a reboot and a repackaging of what had been done earlier in the 1960s with the hippie counterculture scene. So in that movement, you had new forms of music, psychedelic rock and country rock and folk rock, coming along to replace the styles that were there previously. You had a seemingly unending supply of LSD popping up everywhere at all these music festivals and hippie communes. And when you get into the research, you find that most of it got put out there by the CIA, who were directly responsible for this influx of LSD. And then you had all these music festivals like the Monterey Pop Festival and Woodstock and Altamont and all these others, where hordes of these hippies would gather, do the drugs, listen to the music and just trip on out. Well, there's so much evidence now available to show that that whole scene, to a very large extent, occurred at the hands of military intelligence agencies who wanted to control the whole thing and steer it off in desired directions and monitor and surveil the results at every step of the way. So to my thinking, what we had in the UK 21 years later, kicking off in 1987-88 with the acid house scene, was simply a repackaging of that whole dynamic on the opposite side of the Atlantic. So this time, instead of LSD, you had the ready availability of ecstasy i.e. MDMA, which was absolutely everywhere in those times. And there is some evidence to show that many of the pills that turned up at that time were coming out of military intelligence as well, British military intelligence this time. You had very different styles of music, electronically produced dance music, which was replacing the styles that had been there previously, and you had all these warehouse parties, open-air raves, free festivals, and then latterly super clubs, where all these kids would get together under the influence of the drugs, listening to this new music, and again, these situations would have been monitored and surveilled as well. So that's what I feel was going on there. Now this dude, Terence McKenna, is often revered in consciousness circles as something of a guru. Many people I know hang on his every word and, think he's some kind of demigod in terms of the wisdom that he dispensed about plant medicines and human connectedness to nature and all of this. Unfortunately, there is also evidence to suggest that Terence McKenna was working for at least a time in the employ of the FBI, or at least in association with the FBI. But I just want to present to you an aspect of this lecture that he delivered called Evolution in London in 1992. This was right in the midst of the birth of the superclub scene, which had come off the back of Acid House. So in this lecture he said, with electronic culture, you can create shamans for the global, his word, planetary village. And this, to my mind, is the function that rock and roll played in the 60s and house music should play in the 90s. So he's making the connection there himself between these two scenes. Through emphasis in house music and rave culture on physiologically compatible rhythms, sound, properly understood, can actually change neurological states in large groups of people getting together, creating a telepathic community of bonding that hopefully would be strong enough that it would carry the vision out into the mainstream of society. He's just explained the dynamic that takes place at these events, where you've got the combination of subliminal images being planted into the subconscious mind of the people present. You've got the mind-altering aspects of the drugs that are being consumed. You've got this electronically produced music, and you've got this kind of hive mind mentality where all the people present at one of these raves, one of these music festivals, are all kind of on the same vibe and all being exposed to the same frequencies. And we got more of the same idea some almost 30 years later on a show that was put out by the BBC, again, BBC4. It was screened in 2017, and it was talking about the cultural significance of the worldwide dance music movement. And this guy, Moby, DJ and music producer, who just happens to be descended from Herman Melville, the author of the Moby Dick novels, which is how he got his name, made this quote, very similar to the McKenna one. He said, if we were sitting here 25,000 years ago, someone might ask, what do you think is compelling those people to bang on logs and dance around a fire while lights flicker in their eyes? You also just described modern dance culture. So an anthropologist could use those same terms to describe music and dancing and hedonism 20,000 years ago or 5 minutes ago. He's speaking to these primal base desires that exist within us as humans to dance and celebrate and stimulate our minds artificially. And he's saying, this could have been the case thousands of years ago, and what we're seeing now with the dance music scene, which is massive all over the world, literally in every corner of it, is just a modern enactment of this phenomenon that's been with us forever. So looking at where the electronic dance music scene is at now, and bearing in mind that it's got literally millions of dedicated followers all around the world, the fan base is absolutely massive. We have all these events with all the light shows that accompany it and all the decor and stuff. It becomes interesting to look at some of the names of the very largest dance music events which take place. So we have Dream State in California. Right here in the Netherlands, Trance Nation and Luminosity are two big ones. Velvet Hypnotized, Atlantis, Spring Awakening, Awake, Dream Beach, Delirium Eternity, Electronic Family, Digital Society, Digital Dreams, Tomorrow World, Tomorrowland, Future Music Festival, and New Horizons. So looking at these names, they all evoke ideas of altered states of consciousness, dream states, and very specifically, a transhumanist, artificial intelligence, smart grid, Internet of Things reality, which is now upon us. We're not even marching towards it anymore because it's here. So looking at names like Electronic Family, Digital Society, Digital Dreams, Tomorrow World, this, to my mind, is evoking ideas of where human society is headed at the hands of the crazy psychopaths that we have in control. It's revering transhumanism, it's revering electronic and digital ways of doing things and artificial intelligence as really great and where the future is headed. And it's in training the young people who attend all these dance music festivals to accept technology as something that's really good, that's something that's to be embraced. So we see it here in all the names that are being subliminally fed into the minds of these people. And when they're under the influence of mind-altering chemicals, and they've got all these subliminal sound frequencies coming through the music and all the images coming through the decor that you get at these events, then that's some very powerful mind control at work. And just looking at the geographical spread of these events, you will notice that they are literally all over the world. We've got events here in Bali, LA, Chicago, the Netherlands, every corner you could think of. These are comments from a couple of former ravers. So it's people that would be now in their middle age, but back in the day, when they were young and impressionable, they used to go along to these events, and they got swept up in the whole spirit of it. These comments were taken from a discussion on the David Icke forum, where a bunch of grizzled old former ravers were reflecting on what it was they were a part of. These are some very key comments, I feel. One person said, "When the music got more and more hardcore, some of it used to make me feel like it was trying to take over my mind. Not sure how to explain the feeling, but I remember being at a rave and not liking what the beat was doing." Somebody else said, "I think music can be used to amplify the dimensions from which it is created. If you make music with evil thoughts, give it evil rhythms, it will produce evil vibrations." And the people that were commenting on this forum were from every corner of the earth as well. You had ravers from Australia comparing notes with ravers from California, from Europe. Very interesting, with the benefit of hindsight, to think back on what these scenes may really have all been about. And also what they were preparing for, what they were leading in, which is where we're at now, in my view. Then some more comments. It's not in the beats, but in the tonal qualities of the music. If you have the wrong type of distortion, you can have odd order harmonics entering into a sound you like and are tuned into. And then somebody says rave music is more guilty than other genres. The 303, which is the Roland 303 synthesizer sampler, is a transistor-based saw and square generator. And the filters on that thing generate mostly odd order harmonics. So you get the picture. It's all about how sound frequencies wrongly handled, or handled by people with the wrong kind of motives, can be doing us great harm. But we're getting on to the positive stuff. I want to leave things on a positive note, as I generally tend to. Just as sound can be weaponized, the reverse is a possibility, as I mentioned earlier. And this is where so much hope lies. So, music as used for healing, and sound frequencies for healing. In the same way that they can do great harm, they can also do great good if we tap into the right frequencies and make that reconnection back to our inherent nature and our connectedness to everything else in creation. So it's said that with memory loss brought on by dementia, the melodies and lyrics of favourite songs are the last to go, and exposure to fondly remembered music has been known to bring people out of deeply entrenched comas. There's an institution in London known as the Nordhoff Robbins Music Therapy Centre, which specialises in this. They apply music and also the human voice, and it's been claimed that they've got autistic children to communicate for the first time. And it's also been known to bring people out of persistent comas when all else has failed. This goes some way to explain why favourite songs mean so much to us, and all you've got to do is hear a song on the radio from years ago and you feel that tingle going up your spine, you get goosebumps on your arm, you can remember exactly where you were when the record came out, you can remember your emotional state at the time. It all comes flooding back to you just through listening to the arrangement of the sound frequencies in that piece of music. It's very powerful. According to this article, memories of music cannot be lost to Alzheimer's and dementia. Sorry this is so text-heavy, by the way, and very wordy, but this subject doesn't really lend itself to visuals too much. So, wrapping up, if you're especially into a piece of music, your brain does something like autonomous sensory meridian response. This is from the article that we just saw, which feels to you like a tingling in your brain or scalp. It's nature's own little buzz, a natural reward that is described by some as a head orgasm. According to a recently published study, the part of your brain responsible for ASMR doesn't get lost to Alzheimer's. Alzheimer's tends to put people into layers of confusion, and the study confirms that music can sometimes actually lift people out of the Alzheimer's haze and bring them back to normality, if only for a short while. It all speaks to the healing powers of music and sound. Wrapping up with another comment from the BBC. Again, would you believe it? Truth from the BBC. Who'd have credited it? This is from Radio 2's Faith in the World programme that they put out a few years ago, where this person, Jayadev Richardson, a session drummer, says, "Sound vibration is everything because the whole universe, according to Vedic literature, was created by sound. Sound is the first thing that we experience in the mother's womb, and it's the last thing that shuts down when we die. So to hear the right kind of sounds is vital. Free will choice is always present in our existence. Just as sound can be used to control and enslave us, so it could provide a gateway to the type of positive and uplifting experience we would all prefer to be having. So as with all things in life, it comes down to free will choice, our greatest gift that we're endowed by the Creator. So we have the free will choice to make better decisions as to the sounds that we take in. Many of the aspects I've talked about today are in my two books. I think I've only got 4 copies left out there, but if anyone is interested in a copy, I do have them, and there's a whole lot more in there besides. Other than that, I want to thank everyone for listening. I think we're at the end of the day, and I've finished just about on time, so thank you.